What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Well, you may be wondering, why have we started this episode of AmericaTrendsPodcast.com with music? I mean, we rarely, if ever, do that. Well, we're talking today about music and its importance as the backdrop, as the soundtrack to conscience and to politics and to protesting or resisting various things that you see going on in society. So music really is important. I'm Larry Rifkin, John Kropsic. We love music. I'm still out in a band, believe it or not, at this stage of my life. I've got to be out of my mind, John, at this stage to be lugging. I always like to say... As
long as you're having fun.
Well, I am having fun, but I love to say, are you sure this is the way the Beatles started? Unfortunately, this is the way we started and our ending. You see, they had a much better ending.
Well, you opened for...
Well, no, we actually had ZZ Top open for us.
Oh, there you go.
At the Riverbend Festival in Chattanooga. That's a long story, but that's true. I mean, it's true. We were there with 100,000 people in the joint, and at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, because of a documentary they were doing about known bands and unknown bands coming to this event, they had to get us on Stage B, which, by the way, Joe Bonamassa had been on, and the guy who was the lead singer for the Box Tops, who has since passed away. And so we were on Stage B, and ZZ Top gets off, and they say, "You're on!" And it was like, oh, my goodness. 100,000 people were there. And then, of course, by the end, my wife was still there. This was Thursday night at 11, and there were a few other people, kind of stragglers around. And then we walked up the street, and this guy goes, "Hey, you guys were great, man." There's always at least one person who appreciates it. And literally
you didn't
one.
have the girls flocking around you?
Well, my wife was there, and she kept them at bay, of course. That was hard. But at any rate, we wanted to play for you some clips of protest songs. And the other night, John, I went to a concert of one of my favorite bands over the years. And, in fact, when I was on a station called the Natural 92.
Yes, I remember that.
Remember that?
Yes.
We were right at the dawn of FM radio. And it was a brilliant station that was actually the sister FM to the station from which we now record this podcast. And, boy, that was a great station to be part of in that day. It was the mid-'70s, and all of a sudden, FM was beginning to be recognized. Now, you knew a lot about the technology even at that time. Did you think FM was going to become what it's become?
FM was the far superior technology, actually. Better for music. I mean, you get the whole range of music on FM. So I knew it was going to be big at the time, but
at the time, I mean, AM was still the king.
They were,
and so it took a while. People were doing classical music on FM.
Well, that's it. It was
kind
of
throwing
it
away.
It was like the college scene.
Yeah,
FM was the alternative,
right?
At the
and then they realized, hey, this has commercial potential. So this guy, Bob Craig, and I'll give him his due. He developed a format called the Natural 92, and it was an album-oriented mellow rock station. So we were playing a lot of people who you didn't hear. I mean, a lot of people who you did, Carly Simon,
right.
James Taylor, Paul Simon, I mean, on and on and on. But then he would introduce these wonderful acts, some of whom were bigger in the Northeast than in other places, but the Poussette Dart Band and Michael Franks. And there was this one group called Aztec Two-Step. And it's just two guys, though they have a bass player, who they have accompanying them now. But we think of it as Neal Shulman and Rex Fowler. And I have followed these guys since I was playing their music on YZ. And then I did a concert with them when I was in public television. They're wonderful guys, and they still sound great. They were playing in Connecticut just a couple of weeks ago, and they never had a hit, though. And that defined them versus, say, a Jonathan Edwards, who had Sunshine Go Away. And so he always had the hit. And these guys should have had a hit. I mean, they should have had many hits. And I'll give you, if you want to go back into their catalog, go listen to Killing Me or Cosmos Lady or Baking or whatever. I mean, there's so many great songs that they have.
For whatever reason, though, they didn't get to play.
Yeah, exactly. And they had a big deal with Elektra Records. I mean, they are, though, so talented. And Rex does most of the writing, most of the lead singing. Neal is an incredible virtuoso in terms of a lead player on an acoustic guitar. But their music is wonderful. And I saw Rex after the show, having known him a bit from, the days that we did a concert together. And he said, "What are you doing?" I told him about the podcast. He said, "I want to come on." I said, "Well, we're talking about futures." And so I said, "Well, look, why don't we think about the future of protest music and its importance as the soundtrack to so many different movements, even going back to San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury and, Bob Dylan, Phil Oakes, all of these classic performers, and some of the beautiful songs that were written that were protest songs."
Yeah, the closest thing we have that today is rap now, which isn't the same kind of writing, I don't think, but I think
it's very social.
Yes.
It's very political. There's no question that there's still a lot of politics in music, and it's still maybe an anthem for one group or another. And but I'm thinking, I guess, more of the classic folk stuff.
There's nothing like a catchy tune and lyrics you can understand, to get your point across.
Remember, of course, and let's play a little bit of it. Remember Barry Maguire and the Eve of Destruction.
Yep.
I mean, boy, was that foreboding about nuclear war. Why don't we play a clip from that?
Okay.
Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war, but what's that gun you're toting? And even the Jordan River has bodies floating, but you tell me.
And then, of course, I mean, who did better work as it relates to protest music? Even though he said, "Hey, don't look at me, man. I'm not leading the parade here. I'm just singing and playing." Bob Dylan. I mean, and again, a protest song does not have to be angry. Look at "Blowing in the Wind."
Right.
Oh, what a beautiful song.
Beautiful song.
Let's play a little bit of that.
How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? Yes, and how many seas must a white dove see before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they fall out of band? The answer, my friend, is a blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. How many years must the mountain exist before it is washed in the sea? Yes, and how many years and some people exist before they're allowed to be free?
again, we are so grateful that Rex Fowler from Aztec Two-Step is joining us. And Rex, you guys have so many fans out there. There's so many people who know and love your music. And so thank you for coming on. And you're still with us, still performing, and still sounding great in 2017. With us is Rex Fowler from the famed duo Aztec Two-Step. And Rex, when I look at your history, I hear a lot of songs that are built on literature and politics and a real sense of history. I mean, how did that all come about? You write most of the songs. I mean, you seem to be an avid reader. You must be.
Yeah, I mean, kind of a late bloomer. I hated reading in high school, and I got into college and had great English professors, and they inspired and encouraged me as a writer, because, you know, you would write themes or whatever that they would give you, and I got some encouragement from my freshman in college professor, and that was just when I was beginning to. I had just picked up the guitar and was just starting to write songs, so it was a really nice combination for me. I mean, everything seemed to line up.
And where did you draw your inspiration? Not just for, you know, the conscience songs, but even a love song. I mean, where does it come out of? Is it pain in a relationship? Is it reading something in a newspaper that just shocks you into doing something? And if the best that you can do is so powerful because it's backed by music, does that really motivate you to write a conscience song?
All of the above, Larry. You just hit the nail on the various heads, you know. At first, I had the greatest songwriter probably in American music, and we were talking about Bob Dylan, of course. Mm-hmm. He inspired so many of us to pick up a guitar and play. That's why I became a musician. And all of those amazing songs. I mean, there were other writers, you know, Phil Oakes comes to mind, but he seemed to, at the time, kind of hit you over the head with a hammer. Dylan was much more lyrical, poetic, you know, subtle even. And that appealed to my aesthetic much more than, you know, I Ain't Marching Anymore and whatnot. But, you know, that particular song, in hindsight now, many years later, when we were involved with the Phil Oakes Song Night that was arranged by his sister Sonny Oakes, who's also a wonderful DJ in the upstate New York area. But I grew to really appreciate that song, and then the other protest songs that Phil Oakes wrote. I of course loved The Pleasures of the Harbor, and that was a seminal album for him. So, but it was Dylan first and foremost, and you know, and you just try to be somewhere in the ballpark with, you know, and following in those footsteps. And you know, I tend to write broad strokes. It's so difficult to go in and write specific things about. Especially songs of protest or social content, whatever you want to call it. The broader strokes seem to work for me. It just, I believe that really gives you. It's easier for the audience to digest, and believe me, there are plenty of songs that I would, like for instance, you know, Sandy Hook. I would have loved to have written something. I just couldn't. And there are other topics as well. You can't. For me, I just can't sit down and write a song, even though it might deserve a song. It has to happen in a kind of an organic way. And I oftentimes take the newspapers, spread them out, take phrases or keywords or general feelings, and try to put them into some sort of rhyme scheme and narrative that doesn't feel too overbearing.
Well, you do it so well. And I think you pointed out something very important, that it doesn't have to be a loud, angry song, though one might look at rap music today and say that that's one big middle finger to society overall. But a lot of the most beautiful songs that we have like Imagine or even Give Peace a Chance, John Lennon's handiwork, and Blowin' in the Wind by Bob Dylan, whatever it may be, were just gorgeous songs and could have been about anything, not something that was really topical in the day or trying to get people to imagine a different social order.
Yeah, well, Lennon was so good at just putting it there. He was also self-deprecating in that sense, and he was the first to kind of make fun of Imagine because it's so simplistic and ideal in its concept. And yet, isn't that really when you strip it all down? Isn't it supposed to be that easy? Give peace a chance. Imagine a better world, a better society, a better human beings, and we're a despicable species, human beings. And we figure out a way to muck it up, and we muck up our environment, and we muck up our relationships. But, and of course, I mentioned Dylan, but it was John Lennon. If I had but one artist now, it was John Lennon for me, that moved me in so many, beyond words.
What comes first? The words or the music? And what is it that drives? I mean, a lot of us read poetry, and I can tell, obviously, you read a lot of poetry. And, in fact, the name Aztec Two-Step comes from an old beat poet, and you can talk about that. But how are you inspired? And what is it that music, that melody puts and that rhythm behind a message that you want to convey?
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of singer-songwriters, with the exception of Bob Dylan and Elton John and maybe one or two others, write first from melody. They're the easiest. You might be sitting down, in your boxer shorts at 2 a.m. in the morning, and you happen to be picking up your guitar or sitting at the piano, and melodies come. But the hard part is where the lyrics and the lyrics themselves. And for me, I have minimum 20 drafts for every song I write.
20 drafts?
With one or two, wow. Yeah, with one or two exceptions. But it's the melody that inspires the mood, and the mood often dictates what form the song might take. Whether that's a song of social conscience, or whether it's a love song, or just a general song about whatever. Like I wrote a song about Kerouac's novel On the Road. And it just, the rhythm just seemed to flow. It seemed to work, that driving kind of repetitious rhythm, and the words just flew out, literally, But it did take a lot of drafts to get it down.
Well, I want to go back to, I think it's 1989, and we're going to play some of Aztec Two-Step's music. And the first one that I would point to is The Rabbit in the Moon. Tell us what you were attempting there, and how happy you have been over the years with the finished product, and what you were trying to say to us in that song.
Well, I mean, it's you can get lulled to sleep in that song because there's a verse about the rabbit is soft and sweet with floppy ears and lucky feet, and it's got a nice easygoing melody and whatnot. But really, it's a song about nuclear holocaust, apocalypse. And, the concept was there's a rabbit. First of all, the rabbit was something that I discovered when I was reading a book about the Aztecs. We, as youngsters, saw the old man in the moon, or even I remember somebody mentioned something about green cheese.
Yes.
But So I was curious, and it took me 2 or 3 tries to see the rabbit. And once I did, that's all I see. And it really did inspire me in a very simplistic way. Okay, there's this rabbit up there. He's looking down on us, and he's seeing what's going on. And this is what he's seen. So I described how the Spaniards came in and the conquistadors, and they ravaged the people for their, out of their culture and for gold and whatnot. And, mentioned, the modern man has weaponry, and, to blast this all into eternity.
Yeah, I love
you know?
that lyric about how we use the most brilliant minds to kill each other over 1,000 times, whatever it is. Why don't we listen to that song? And I think people with this perspective will really be able to glean a lot from it.
Called Mexico, before the ancient Aztec ruins. First saw the rabbit in the moon. The night was clear, the moon was full, and I could feel its tidal pull. It looked so bright and white and round. The rabbit's head was pointing down. Soft and sweet, with floppy ears and lovely feet. And though it cannot fly or sing, it's never harmed a living thing. When Spaniards wrought their holy wars in conquering conquistadors, it made the rabbit's blood run cold to see them killed from greed of gold. All into eternity, designed by our most brilliant minds to kill us all 1,000 times. Could history repeat once more by modern day conquistadors? Who would you think in Looney Tunes to see a rabbit in the moon? I often think about that night when I was woken by a light. Or was it light that stole my dream? Or did I hear the rabbit scream?
What about the song Living in America, Rex? I love that song, number one. And I know we just did an interview with a gentleman who wrote a book about the end of loyalty, how companies and corporations really are starting to stomp on the working man after a pretty generous era from the 40s to the 70s. What were you trying to say about the common man in America, and what would you call or typify that song?
Well, my sister was, my older sister, Andrea, was working processing refugees beginning at the end of Vietnam in Southeast Asia. She was over in Thailand and working at a camp called Bondi Night, which I also wrote a song about. It really, for me, was a letter from home to her about what was happening in America. Now, I hope we don't offend any of your listeners, but I refer to that era in the 1980s as the Reagan regime. And, you know, look, there was a lot of, he was a very strong and good president, and you know, there was a lot of bipartisan work that was done, and good things, you know, were happening, besides, you know, some of the social programs that I didn't necessarily agree with. But, and, you know, I felt that some of the policies were going against the average Joe. And, you know, the working man, as I mentioned, you know, in the song. So, but that was the premise for the song. And then, you know, I really just took, starting with, you know, where I grew up in rural America, you know, used to the farms, the towns, you know, the sights, the sounds. And, you know, I just kind of went through each thing that seemed to make sense to me, you know, here's to the city streets pulsing, you know, pumping the pulse and beat to America. You know, and I really was thinking of rap music at that time, to tell you the truth. Hip-hop, especially rap. And, you know, my son, Rufus, really edifies me to appreciate a lot of the poetry and whatnot in hip-hop and rap music. Some of it is certainly, you know, was very graphic, but it was very honest, and certainly it was as you know, edifying, if that's the word I keep using.
Fields and streams, here's to the hopes and dreams of America. Here's to the city streets, pumping the pulse and beat to America. Here's to the farms and towns, the sights, the sounds. Here's to the ups and downs of America. Here's to the tried and true, the red, the white, and the blue of America. Silver screen, the music scene in America. Here's to the arts and crafts, people who make us laugh in America. Here's to the song, the dance, the true romance, all those who take a chance in America. And here's to the people too, whose dreams have all come true in America. Ooh, yeah, 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 yeah. And here's to the working man, doing the best he can in America. And here's to the families living like refugees in America. Here's to the very young, the very old, the very left in the cold in America. And here's to the precious few caring about them too in America. Here's to the so-called kooks, known as the anti-nukes in America. And here's to the peaceful souls working for gun control in America. Here's to the blood, the sweat, the tears, the fears. Here's to the volunteers of America. And here's to all of you doing what you can do in America. Ooh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh, it was a great song, and I love the power of the message about, the common man, the working man. And look, any politician can take all of that, and they can become charlatans and demagogues using that kind of material. A lot of politicians have taken from different writers and songwriters and try to make them their anthem, that I won't back down or whatever it may be.
Right.
And
good example.
Right, exactly. And many people get upset that that's not what I meant. I didn't mean it for you to take a hold of it and make it your anthem. I want to ask you, though, and I want to get into your music today and your new CD. And today, a lot of people say that other movements have had a song as their soundtrack. And in fact, we're recording this during the Summer of Love when you go back to 1967, and now here we are in 2017. Was that a real representation of music and idealism and frustration at the war in Vietnam all coming together at one time when you go back to the Summer of Love, 1967?
What really shocked me was after Woodstock that that the whole country wasn't just tie-dye and peace and love and blowing bubbles and dropping acid and whatnot. And when we elected Nixon, I was just completely, I couldn't believe it. The silent majority, and I don't think it really was true. And you see it today. You see it with Trump being elected, and the poor gullible people that really think this guy's going to do something for them. And had they been paying any attention, they would have seen that whatever he touched absolutely was not the Midas touch. It was the septic touch. And these gullible people who didn't do their homework are going to find out firsthand what, the knife in the back and whatnot from this guy. And he certainly had a lot to do with the song that this new record, Naked. But, it really was from, it really, I still can't believe that there aren't more people who really aren't more altruistic. The people that would listen to John Lennon and Bob Dylan and all the great songwriters and writers.
Well, it's our generation that's grown up to be the adults in our society. So how can we typify the impact of music? Because we'd all love to think, and I play a little music, that when we do play music, it sticks and the messages stick, and that we begin to move along with, some of the messaging. Do you feel that the music that you're writing at any one point in time, including Naked, will have an impact? And tell us what you were attempting. We're going to play that song, Naked. What are you trying to do as part of the quote-unquote resistance movement today?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I'm thinking locally. I'm volunteering where I can, for a little songwriting and a little encouragement for the young kids. I'm supporting candidates that really do care about environment and whatnot. And then, I have a newsletter, a monthly newsletter that I put the White House and congressional numbers in there, and encourage people that if they're not happy with the direction, or they like a specific situation or policy, to give a call and say, I'm for or against it. And it was very encouraging. I was working, we booked months and months in advance, and we were working the day of the Women's March, but we almost drove right by it. We had a gig in Maryland that day, but I was able to go to the Science March, and that just inspired me beyond words. And so I just love the fact that, our people of all ages, and they talk about the millennials who really do are discerning and really are less, materialistic than perhaps a few of the generations prior to that. And it's encouraging to see that people really, and that to me is the best part of this whole thing, is that people are coming together and pushing back and speaking up. And that's the silver lining of all of this. And hopefully the people that didn't vote or voted a certain way, thinking that, what's the point of voting for some, the lesser of two evil with a candidate, hopefully they're going to turn it around, and in the next, in 2018 and then in 2020, we'll get people in there that really are concerned about the environment, common sense gun legislation, common sense infrastructure, so on and so forth, social network. And for the life of me, I don't understand why even the most conservative people wouldn't want to have a one-pay system. It would save businesses billions and billions of dollars if they had that taken off their docket. And, let the government, where all of the civilized countries in the world give their citizens basic health care.
Yeah, well, Warren Buffett is saying companies don't need tax reform. They've figured out already how to game the system. Yeah. What they want is health care reform. Well, let me ask you, because Mick Jagger just dropped 2 new solo songs bemoaning the political climate in England and America. And he said, I couldn't wait to put a full album together. I'm so angry. I'm so nervous.
Right.
I'm so frustrated. Now, you guys just put together this new CD called Naked. And you referred me, when we were looking at doing this podcast, to the title song, Naked. And tell us what you were attempting. Is that the most political song on the CD?
Yes, but there's another one called World Without Walls, which in a very cool, upbeat, jazzy way, it talks about, living idealistically in a world without walls. And it was a song that I co-wrote with my dear friends from Devon Square, who was a band that I championed for years and had open for us. And finally, Ahmet Ertegun got one of their records and put it out immediately, and then signed him up for another record. So that was one of the last signings he did before you talk about Mick Jagger. That's when he took his terrible fall at one of the Stones concerts and died shortly after that from a head injury. But what a legacy he left. But anyway, so I co-wrote the song with Devon Square, and I kind of updated the lyrics a little bit. Tommy Dean, who was a member of the band, came down and played rhythm guitar on that, and mandola as well. So I'm very proud of that. And it follows the next song after Naked, which is the 4th song on the album, goes right into World Without Walls. So those 2 songs, I think, are really spot on. And again, using the broad strokes, I really don't want to be overbearing or confrontational. I think it's much more effective if you can do that for the listener, and they might be less apt to going, oh, well, I don't agree with that on a political scale, but I'm really reaching out for people, to come together and make it a better place to live. And, we're all born naked with wings to soar. That's the underlying theme, and with a little peace and a little push and shove, a little peace and love, maybe we'll all break through to something better.
Well, why don't we play a bit of Naked and World Without Walls so everybody can understand what you're attempting to do and enjoy it for themselves. Why don't we do that, Rex?
Einstein, no fear one. Blame the politicians, blame the internet, our morning papers, our nightly news. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. It's never been more true. See nowhere to hide. There's no such place as the other side. You're either in or else outside in a world without walls. The world's a ball, no sides at all. It's all that's left of the rise and fall. It's all for one, one for all, in a world without walls, in a world without walls. This world has open arms to hold you, embolden your cool grace. But when this world wants to control you, enfold you, love is just us in a way. China's long, Berlin's is gone, Jerusalem sings the saddest song. So shine a light or bang a gong for a world without walls, a world without walls.
You use many references to writers, thinkers, artists in your lyrics. How hard is it to marry thought with emotion? And what is it that you judge success with one of your songs? I mean, how it connects, how fans come up to you and say, that has become my theme. What is it that you are looking for in terms of reaction?
Well, look, one of the things that I think Neal and I are most proud of is that we've hung in there with this crazy career of 46 years now, in spite of the fact that we didn't have a legitimate hit. We didn't have like Jonathan Edwards, one of the people that we still work with on a regular basis. To do an annual concert with him and John Poussette Dart, two guys that came out of the 70s. But John Edwards had an actual hit song, Sunshine. We never had that. We had what were called turntable hits, and that means we got a lot of progressive FM airplay. When radio was playing Aretha Franklin and, John Lennon and Aztec Two-Step and Joni Mitchell and James Taylor and Richie Havens and Nina Simone and you name it, Sinatra. Everybody kind of, in an hour's time, you'd hear all of these people. And so the perception for people that were listening to the progressive FM stations or the college FM stations thought of us as that kind of an act. And we get mail that goes, my three favorite acts, and they'll mention like, the Beatles, Joni Mitchell, and Aztec Two-Step, and I have to laugh out loud. But that is the perception that they have of us because that's what they heard when they listened to the radio. So, that's where we built our foundation, our legacy, and those, thank goodness, we're somebody's favorite band because we're still doing it. So,
well, you guys are one of my favorite bands, and I've got to tell you that it's only, by dint of serendipity that you didn't have that one breakout hit. Killing Me is one of the songs that I can go back to refresh my thought process and to, I wish I had written that song. Is there any song that you look at where you say, I wish I had written that song, a song of conscience?
Oh, yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, absolutely. I mean, Tears for Fear. I love, that wonderful anthemic, hey now, the dream is over. I mean, that's a very subtle, beautiful, song, I think, of, it's an idealistic song, and maybe who knows? Is it a love song? I don't know. I always thought of it as being this beautiful song about utopia or something. And,
well, isn't that the beauty of music? I mean, you could invest whatever you want in the lyric, and it goes on forever. When you think of the 1950s and 1960s, from the coffee houses to the arenas, I mean, many of those songs are really influencing young people today. What of your catalog do you think really politically charges, the emotions and the excitement and the action of your own audience? What is it? Which songs?
Well, we were fortunate to get a tremendous amount of airplay with the first two albums, Electra in '72, and then the follow-up '75 RCA album. And that's the foundation. And but we've been very blessed because we've been able to introduce songs from each album that followed. And many of them, like Rabbit in the Moon and Living in America, Days of Horses, that have stuck, and so they come expecting to hear those songs as well. So we've been able to stay contemporary. We're not just a nostalgic band. And when we introduce a song or two before the records come out, we know pretty much if it's something that resonates. We get. I mean, that was the beautiful thing about Naked. There was no question that song resonated with our audience. I mean, when you get a sustained applause after a song, you've done something good. And so we're blessed that we can go out and play in front of a live audience and get their feedback and know that they at least will give a listen and let us know if this is something that they might be interested in hearing going forward. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, let me ask you in closing, do you think that any particular movement has really been propelled by music? When we look back, I would think the civil rights movement back in the 60s. I would think that the environmental movement, John Denver even, with his beautiful song, say, Rocky Mountain High. I mean, he may not been thought of as a protest singer in any way. I mean, do you think there's any one era or any one topic that has benefited the most from the imagination, creativity, and talent of musicians?
Well, more than ever, hip-hop, I think. And believe me, there's a lot of young and middle-aged white people who really like hip-hop, and they're listening to it. And they always are talking about police brutality. They're talking about, economic hardships and whatnot. And I think you'll hear a song or two if you listen to the college stage, the kids, the stuff that they play, and it's they do. There's a lot of good hip hop music played on that, out of Compton was a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, so look, and are there good social conscious songs coming out, and are there great folk rock bands, that have followed in the footsteps of the great song, folk rock artists from the 60s. We just helped bring some of that music from the 60s into the 70s. I'm sure there were some bands, the Abbott Brothers, and I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but I'm sure there were some of them that, might have heard a song or two of ours and, might have inspired them to go forward, although I've never gotten that.
Well, you definitely have inspired many. Rex, in closing, for those who now are really interested and curious about Aztec Two-Step and your music, broad stroke, 30,000 feet, because this will be on and people will be listening to it at many different times at their own volition. What would you suggest if they want to go back and get the catalog or find out more about where you guys are going to be?
Well, like everybody else, and thank goodness for the for websites and the internet. We have that, and we are on Facebook, and I guess at some point we'll be on Instagram and Twitter. Although I don't know. But look, Aztec2step.com or Google us. It's TWO, not the number 2, and they'll come to our website and everything you need to know and more. It's pretty cool biography. And we've performed with everyone from Springsteen and the Beach Boys to jazz artists and comedians and everybody in between. So we've had quite a rich touring career. And then you'll see every record, you'll see the discography. The lyrics to the new album Naked are under the discography link, and there's a tour link there, so anything anyone needs to know.
Well, Rex has this compelling voice and way to write. Neal is one of the great acoustic guitarists in terms of providing a lead and power behind a duo. They're one of the most powerful duos you will ever hear, and one of the best over a long sweep of time. Rex Fowler from Aztec Two-Step, thank you so much for joining us today on America Trends.
Larry, Yeah, my pleasure, and best of luck to you and John, and thanks for the shout-out. And real quickly, Neal Shulman has 3 songs on this new record that are just knocked it out of the ballpark. So
they are. His song about New York is wonderful.
Yeah, Long Black Lincoln, and he's got a song about, an ode to the rock and roll. It's really, really good, and he has a song about New Orleans, and we're going to get it to the great progressive mayor of New Orleans, and I'm looking forward to that as well. But he's our group's George Harrison. George didn't get that many songs in, but when he did,
they were good. Rex Fowler, thank you so much for coming by. I can't thank you enough.
In your painting, I see the world as if inside of you. So bright and colorful, so strange and new, light years beyond my black and white. In your paintings, I sense your wilderness, I hear its call. I soar above your roaring waterfall, beyond all boundaries of light. Oh, blue, these are just words I write for you. And blue, yours are so many times more true. In your paintings, I stand in awe before your revelry, drawn by your magic and your mystery. I melt into the fire of your blood. In your paintings, I fantasize you'll see beneath my face these swirls of sorrow, somehow you'll erase. Then paint my empty canvas with your brush. Ah, blue, these are just words I paint for you. And blue, you paint a million times more true. There must be something you can do. Oh, in your painting, 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 in your painting.
If you like this episode, please leave us a kind rating or review. I'm on my hands and knees. Please do it on iTunes, because your review is really critical for us to continue providing this podcast. And John, I know that iTunes looks at this. They want to make certain that we have some ranking, some visibility, and that we're getting some traffic, and then they give you better positioning.
Absolutely, and this way it'll put us in the forefront so you can find us much easier on your iPhone or Android, whatever you may be using.
And they may even send you out an alert. So please, if you can, don't miss a single episode of America Trends Podcast. And, John, they can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher.com.
And also subscribe on our website.
Oh, absolutely.
We send out a little blurb, and we can also take your emails there at newsletter@rifkinradio.com. That's another way to get us.
And we do not sell or share
No
our list.
spamming, nothing.
Well, I don't know. Does anybody want our list? I don't know, but we don't do it.
Good question.
Even if they asked us.
Even if
Nobody's
they
asked
asked
us.
us.
But
Right.
And when you do subscribe, let us know on Facebook and Twitter. We're getting very active on Facebook and Twitter. Our handle on both platforms, and John, this is really easy, at Trends Podcast. That's it.
That's real easy.
You like that? Did you get that?
I got that.
Okay.
I'm going to have to
gonna
check
give
it
you a
out
quiz.
now. I'm going to have to twit it.
We want to thank you, of course, personally for subscribing. And we also would like to get some of your ideas and questions for future episodes of America Trends Podcast. And that's important, too, because we're all over the map. Our interest editorially in the future, John, has no bounds. But we want to know what it is that you'd like to hear from us. If there was a segment that you'd like to see us follow up on, or if there's something in depth that you'd like us to deal with, please let us know that, too.
We're looking at the future. There's so much we can look at.
Yeah, and the topics that we've dealt with, I mean, we have gotten such incredible guests over the recent period, but they're only going to come to us if they know we've got an engaged and interactive audience.
Absolutely.
So it's really important that you become part of this podcast in so many different ways that we're sharing with you today.
You're absolutely right. We need your support and your help and your reviews.
And your ideas.
And ideas.
Or questions on Facebook and Twitter. And by the way, you can direct message us at Trends Podcast or using the hashtag Trends Podcast. You can also add an email address if you have a public one that you'd like us to give out.
Yeah, good. Hey, and you know what? We didn't mention Amazon.
Oh, yes. We have an Amazon store.
Yes.
And so if you go up, you don't have to buy the things that might be highlighted at that particular time. You can buy any book, and there's some benefit that comes back
Just
to
put
us.
what you're looking at in the little search engine block there, and it'll take you right to Amazon, and it'll help us out.
Absolutely. And it doesn't really cost you anything more because they have built that into their pricing structure. So we get a little taste and you get more programming like this and you get the item that you were looking for. So it works for all of us.
It's a win-win.
Absolutely. Win-win-win.
Win-win-win.
So for more information on America Trends and for the latest updates on upcoming episodes, be sure to like our page on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can find us at Trends Podcast. And again, you can find John and I here in our studio performing as best we can for you.
That's right.
And
Let
making
us out.
certain- What's that? They're not going to let us out. No one is. Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us today on America Trends. We'll see you next time.
We hope to hear from you soon.
Oh, by the way, we are posting all the time. And we're posting on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Good point.
So just be aware, if you're looking for new episodes, they're coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays. When you wake up, before you go out on your jog or your walk and you want to take us with you, we'll be there for you.
Very good.
All right. Have a great day. That.